Hey guys, I am back, and today we're going to look at how to write and publish a book in 7 days. If you've ever struggled to do any type of writing work, any type of homework that involves writing, writing short stories, writing poems, writing term papers, doing any kind of essay work, and that is something that a lot of people struggle with. What can happen is that you can spin an idea about yourself. We call it a judgment, okay? You can spin that judgment about yourself and turn it into something like, I am not good at writing. Let's move this a little bit closer. I'm not good at writing, or I'm not disciplined. And the shame and the guilt from that further spins up, and it takes on a life of its own, and it could even metastasize and transfer to other types of work that is similar to writing. So if your mind just says, "Oh, that's like writing," what comes along with that, what rides along with that, is those set of judgments. Okay, so how do we break out of that? Um, what I'm going to do is, again, go through my process, and I want you to steal my process. Don't take everything I say literally. I want you to look at how I'm thinking, look at how I think, look at how I operate. Okay. So this is from the perspective of somebody who comes to me and says, you know, I have this book in my heart, in my mind, and I think about it all the time. It keeps me up at night. But every time I sit down to start writing, I get distracted, or I have trouble focusing, or I feel like what I write is not good, and I never quite get it done. So first of all, the first thing we're going to do is sit down, and we're going to look at what are the judgments, because we're always looking around what we want and what are the things that are in the way. What are the judgments that are in the way? What are the beliefs that we have? What are the ideas and notions that we have about this thing that we say we want to do? So let's first talk about, what do we mean when we say we want to write and publish a book? Okay. And then we'll look at, well, what's a book exactly? What is that? What is that? You may have a notion about that that's blocking you. For example, um, start with, what is writing a book? And then we'll talk about, what is a book? And you may find that you actually have some ideas that are hidden in the back of your mind that you developed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Maybe you developed it in school. Maybe you had a bad experience with a teacher and you were writing. Um, uh, Maybe you tried to do this on your own and you were trying to use software and it didn't work out, didn't have a good experience, or somebody criticized you, or somebody attacked you, or somebody said, well, you can't do that, or somebody told you you got it in your head because somebody maybe told you that you couldn't do it for whatever reason. We're not worried about the reason now. We're just exploring now. Okay. So there's no, we can relax at this point. So what is writing a book? So for example, what if your notion of writing is um, sitting at a typewriter or computer, and you struggle to do that with other tasks, where you're going to transfer that over, you're going to transmute that over to writing a book, right? Um, that it has to, for example, be done all at once, all at once. I need a solitude and an inspiring space. I need solitude. I need an inspiring space. I need quiet. Right? Um, has to be done on a computer. Be done on a computer. Right? Um, so again, since we are brainstorming at this point, and what a mind map does is it allows you, it's safe for you to go back to different points because something that I write here is going to give me ideas here, right? So I don't have to have all the answers here. I don't have to get everything out of our system at this point. I can just start and then jump back around because a lot of us who are maybe ADD or we struggle with focusing, it's not a problem. It's just different, and you can still be creative if you can't if you struggle to do things in outline format. So sometimes we think about what is a book, and we say it has to be a certain number of pages, has to be uh, has to be X pages, right? We go to the bookstore and we see books, and everything is 100 pages. Or say we're writing so we want to write a psychology book, and your psychology book is in the psychology section, everything you see, everything you pick up is 200 pages, and you may have gotten into your mind that, oh, it has to be 200 pages, it has to be this big book, has to be pages, has to have a cover, needs to have a cool um, cover design, for example. Needs to have a cover. Needs to have a cover. Needs to be printed. You may have the idea in your head, especially if you're like me and you're reading books before Kindle, and Kindle was something new. You may have it in your head that, oh, well, I need a publisher, or I have to pay to get it printed. I don't have money to get it printed, to self-publish or print my own copies, or it's not going to be good enough, or it doesn't fit in any publisher, so I can't get it out. And that may stop you if you like work backwards to thinking, well, I need all of these things to be able to have a book, right? Uh, hold on, need a money advance from a publisher. And I'm doing this in front of you guys, because I want you to see um, that you can give yourself time. You can breathe, sit down and relax, and you can think these things through. Often, our level of panic and level of haste when we set out to do something important, because we made it important, it metastasized into this big thing in our mind. When we start to think about it, we feel like there has to be a lot of emotion around it, and that it can't just be an activity, just like you go and you vacuum your floor. Well, a lot of people sit down and write the same way they're vacuuming their floor. Stephen King sits down and just writes every day. He just writes. You don't have to write anything that makes sense. You just have to write. Right? Need a publisher. Um, has to go through a publisher. Has to go through a reputable publisher, right? That if I publish it myself, it doesn't count. So what we're looking for here is um, what else makes it not count. And these are the judgments that we've built up over time about how things should be or how things are supposed to be, and they can be a big blocker for us. Okay, what is a book? Now, next thing we do is we look inside a little bit, look at ourselves, look inside, and look at our behavior. Well, if you say that, I struggle to sit down and write, what happens is that we may create judgments about that as well and spend more energy and time and criticizing yourself, your sort of inner critic. That takes energy, that takes mental energy, right? And it can be exhausting. So if we look inside, when we look at what do we do naturally, right? What do we do um naturally without without pressure, without pressure, um, and where there is a lot of energy. Pressure, what we do naturally, um, what we enjoy. But hold on, let me update. Let me move this around. What we have a track record of doing. So sometimes um, we can pick up habits and behaviors and skills that aren't even a part of what's called our zone of genius. Okay, so there's a thing called zone of genius, zone of genius, and zone of competence. Okay. That's another way to say to to talk about this list. Zone of genius is a idea created by Gay Hendricks. He's a performance coach, and he had this book called The Big Leap. I'm going to mention it here, The Big Leap, because I realize that some of you may want this mind map later on. Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. All right. So, zone of genius and zone of competence. Zone of genius is what are you a natural at? Okay. And this also gets into, well, what's the topic of your book? Because if it's something that's outside of your zone of genius, that's another thing that may be difficult to do. We're not saying, not everything is necessarily destroyed by tons of judgments. Some things are just out of your wheelhouse, and that's okay. And that's okay. What are you a natural at? Zone of competence. What have you developed over time? That you are good at, that you're good at doing, right? So some things we're natural at, like what I'm doing right now, talking to people, talking and brainstorming and teaching things. I'm a natural at teaching, right? Yeah, I've learned more about it over time, but I got my first experience teaching when I was in martial arts, and this is something where when you start doing it and you feel like you're flying and you feel like, wow, you're like a fish that's finally been put into water, and you say, this is my thing, like this is what I should be doing, is teaching and working with people. Actually, I should say it's not necessarily teaching; it's working with people. That's a better way to say it. Working with people on important things, right? Zone of competence. What have you developed over time that you're good at, right? So these are, and you may pick this up at work, skills. You may have been interested, and you may have developed it as um, as a consequence of working with your hobbies, for example. And what he's really talking about is this upper limit problem. Upper limit problem. Uh, and he says the zone of genius is the way that you break through your upper limit problem. uh, how he defines upper limit problem as as um, not working or not operating in your zone of genius. Right? Okay, you're lacking energy and motivation. Okay, so we want to look at that, and the obvious example that I'm going to use myself as an example is that if I was like coaching myself, like if I could clone myself, if I could do body doubling with myself, right? Um, uh, Using talking out loud or talking it out loud. Well, how would you do that? Like, how would you create a book with somebody who is a natural at talking and teaching and explaining to people when there's some when a person is now in front of you, right? So let's say someone is um, good at talking and explaining things. Explaining things. So this is the example we're going to use. You're totally free to jump in the comments. Let me actually check comments right now. No comments. All right, excellent. All right. So somebody's good at talking and explaining things. So now we're going to use transmutation. So first, I'm going to define what I mean by transmutation. It's taking um, energy and moving it somewhere else. Right? Or actually, I should say, taking energy and turning it into something else. Right. So the obvious example is we have light, and light can become heat, and heat can become light, and 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 so forth. Energy is not created or destroyed; it just transmutes, right? And that's why if you have an older lamp, that bulb gets hot because some of the energy that's coming through the outlet goes into the air as heat because your bulb is not very efficient, right? Cool. So we're going to transmute this good at explaining and talking to people. And the obvious way to do that is we're going to combine that with something we already know because we're also going to look across industries. So one technique we're going to use is transmutation. The other technique we're going to use is looking across industries. And I got this from Blue Ocean Strategy. So there's a book, awesome book called Blue Ocean Strategy. And what this is really about is, I mean, this is a business book. It's about business, and the idea here of looking across industries is you can find ideas for your industry in other industries. Let me think of an example for you. Right. So one example is delivery. You have pizza delivery, food delivery. Um, and I proposed to one of my friends that he should do the same thing for his Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes, the same way that Little Caesars took away the what do you call it? A lot of pizza places actually did this. Domino's has done this as well. They have less indoor seating, like indoor restaurant seatings. So there's a lot less Pizza Huts and Domino's that allow you to come in and sit down. Like when I was a little kid, my mom used to take me to go get pizza at places like Straw Hat. You sit down and you order pizza and you wait for it, right? So to save money, they got rid of the sit-in restaurant part, and they create a storefront where you go in, you do carry out, and then they have pizza livery, right? So what if you did the same thing for jujitsu, where instead of having a school, you you deliver lessons the same way you deliver pizza. Okay, well that's not really efficient because you're not driving to different places, and how much does that cost? Well, the only thing you have to think about is, well, what would be a more expensive? What would be how could you up the value of that jitsu lesson, right? How could you uh, maybe it's $1,000 an hour, maybe it's $5,000 an hour. So then you get to brainstorm and play with, okay, well, what does a $5,000 an hour jujitsu lesson at your house, where the teacher drives to your house? What kind of lesson is that, right? So looking across industries. So now transmutation plus looking across industries, I'm going to take something from the world of direct response marketing. Direct response marketing. And something that's very common in direct response marketing is recycling content. So we're gonna take a typical tactic that they do, a typical recycling content example, and the one I'm going to use is, and I know all this because I've exposed myself to like all kind of different fields, right? And it helps to sort of anything that you're interested in, anything that you have an intuition to learn about, you should go and learn about it because it means that there's something in there for you. Like remember we said in our principles. Principles. One principle is um, anything that uh, triggers you, good or bad, or that you have an intuition about, is you slash yours. I think um, I stated it better, but one thing I'm doing with these live streams is I'm working all this out for myself, right? So that I have a bunch of content from which I can do this. Yes, it would be a lot better if I could clone myself and I could do this with myself. But um, next best thing is next best option is doing this on a live stream, right? So that's why I'm doing this. Anything that triggers you, good or bad, that you have an intuition about is you or yours. Okay. So recycling content. So a very typical example is before cell phones and before the internet, a direct response, a, a, uh, a they had this idea of tele seminars. I was trying to think of what the word is back then. Tele seminars, and what that is a bunch of people sign in over the phone, kind of like the old school like party line in the 80s. So you log in to phone meeting, and there's some way. It's usually a phone service that records it. So they record an interview, record the interview. So you probably have guessed that this is going to be like a back and forth interview. So record an interview. Okay, well, what does an interview do? What is it? An interview has some sort of structure, i.e., somebody has thought through, well, what to ask first, how to intro, and how to conclude, and even how to let other callers on the line who are listening, who are on mute, actually ask questions. So they have a structure, and then they have a prompt, and then there's some personality because the person who is conducting the interview has to have a little bit of personality, sort of elicit a response from the from the speaker. So you record an interview. Then what they do is they take that interview recording and they have CDs printed or cassettes. Cassettes. How do you do cassettes again? Cassettes or CDs created, and that becomes a product, right? So getting on the phone and having a phone call and talking to somebody's, let's say, multi-level marketing or screenwriting, whatever the field is, you're inviting an expert and you're making that recording and um, you're burning it to CD, and then you either mailing that CD out, because again, this is before email and before the internet and before cell phones. You're mailing that out as a value add, and later on you can sell that as part of a seminar, right? There's even a site called I think it's hard to find seminars.com. If you want to see how this actually plays out, hard to find seminars. The guy's name is, I think, Michael. Oh man, what's the guy's name? Hard to find seminars.com. Yeah, Michael Senoff. Yep, Michael Senoff. He's actually made a business of calling people up, no, well, creating these calls, inviting people for calls, and recording them. Because a lot of this older wisdom isn't necessarily on the internet. You have to get it from the person's mouth because they're baby boomers or they're older. They're from the golden age of direct response. Well, we can take that golden age direct response tactics and we can start to use them. So it's easy to get on a phone call. It's easy to get on a Zoom call, for example. So we would use a Zoom call. So what we would do is take a Zoom call and we will plan out, well, what are we going to ask, right? So Zoom call and plan out the structure, the prompt, the personality, just like an interview. Same thing, right? Interview. And now we have video and audio. So we have video that we can reuse and we have audio that we can reuse. And then what we do from there is we can just transcribe it. And I know the question you have. You're saying, well, Zaid, that is just an interview. My book is not an interview. My book is not an interview. So your book can, V1, the first version, the minimum viable product that you get out into the market, because this is all about getting your stuff out as fast as possible. Okay, why do we want to do that? I'm going to talk about why we're doing that. Okay. Some ideas there. Okay. Why do we want to get your book out as soon as possible? Great. And this goes back to your personality and how your brain works. If the lights turn on in your head when there's a person in front of you, what you want to do is use your book to get more people in front of you, right? So we're using the book. We're using V1 of our book to get people in front of us. Why are we doing that? Because part of our process is that we always want to build in sources of motivation, and that will keep us going. That will keep us going. So here's the sequence, and I'm not really putting, as you can see, I'm not really putting much energy into. It's 20 minutes past 1 over here, and what we're doing here is we are creating a feedback loop for ourselves. Okay? Create or design feedback loops into our processes so we can keep working. Now, what's going to happen here? So we record our interview, and we transcribe, and from there, it's just a matter of copywriting. It's just having it's a lot easier to edit the book than to write, or to edit content than to write content. So we get this this tidal wave of content. Then later on we can edit it, right? My idea is to just edit for spelling and get it out. So the original direct response recorded interviews, they're on CD. They were also transcribed, but back then there's no internet, so you're paying somebody to transcribe it, right? So CDs created, transcribed, print version, print, not person, like print version as well. Okay, and what direct response people would do, they would sell both. And if you look at a lot of, if you go look up like Dan Kennedy, and there's this guy who writes the $1 million consulting books. I can't think of his name right now, but he also sells. I actually have a seminar that I bought of his off eBay that is actually this thing that I'm talking about. It's a phone call. It just happens to be a very valuable phone call that was printed on CD and sold, right? So we're going to transcribe. So we have a lot of text, and then we're going to edit our text, and we want to do some spelling, obviously, and maybe some titles and subtitles, but not much more than that, right? Often reading something that people said, you understand, people do that all the time. People read, a lot of these politicians, do you think they actually write books? No, they have ghostwriters. They interview for hours, and they come up with this large amount of content, which is text content, right? My Mac's gonna turn off soon, so just go ahead and finish. All right. So subtitles and no cover. You just have a title, book title, subtitles, no table of contents, no table of contents. You don't need it, and you put it out on Kindle. Now, what you do with that, at the same time, you create an email list. You can use MailChimp, Substack, or Constant Contact, or ConvertKit. Well, a lot of these are free under a certain amount of subscribers. When you create an email list, you now have a group of people that you can talk to and ask, and they can ask you questions. And when they ask you questions, that becomes more content for you. So V1, sequence 4 V1, leads to version 2. So now you have this feedback loop. So you can have version 1, and then when you publish your updated edition, that's all it is, you can then publish that. And as a perk, you can promise that anybody who's on your email list always gets the updated version. So you're building your tribe of followers, of readers. So offer any updated editions to your 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 subscribers, subscribers, and that's it. You can get that done not even in 7 days. You could do that in 2 days, right? There's actually calculators online that tell you how many um, how many uh, how many minutes of transcribing gives you a certain number of words. So you could even say, "Hey, I'm going to record for 4 hours. I know I'm going to get X hundred words, and X hundred words. There's calculators that tell you X amount of words is X amount of pages. So you could even do the math on that, right? Um, I'm going to plug in so this doesn't turn off. Give me a couple minutes. Is there a mute here? Is there a mute? Oh, there's a mute. Yeah, I just realized that I've been talking on mute the whole time. Yeah, that's why I need more. I need more. Um, I need more people in my audience, and which is great because I am doing this right now, and I want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to go out and live stream and build your audience and put your stuff out there. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that um, I talked about the sequence: record our interview, transcribe, edit text, no table of contents, no index. I basically talked about value for this past 5 minutes. Okay, and the idea of value is that if your stuff is valuable enough, they won't care if it's on a CD transcribed from a from a fuzzy phone interview. They won't care if it's a PDF. They won't care if it's you getting on live stream like I'm doing now. I believe that what I'm saying is valuable. So I'm going to come out there and I'm going to talk about it in the format that I love talking about it, which is talking about it and using whiteboards and using mind maps and sketching things out, right? I'm not going to go and make a big PowerPoint because that's not my thing. You need to figure out what your thing is, right? Um, back to here, back to these zone of genius. What is your thing? All of these questions help you arrive at your zone of genius. So that basically sums up what I said when I was muted. And now I know something more about StreamYard and about this platform. I know that I have to be mindful of whether or not I am muted or not, and what's going on in this sort of dashboard system, right? So we have to forgive ourselves for making these mistakes because if we don't, we'll never get our stuff out there. And what I'm all about is helping you take that thing that you want to get out into the world that you feel is valuable, get that thing out as dirty and as beat up as it is. Because even if it's dirty and rough, if it's valuable, if you dial up the value, like the ju- jujitsu example, if it's a $5,000 jujitsu lesson, nobody's gonna care that you are driving to their house and doing it there. They're not gonna care that you have a school, or they aren't gonna care whether or not you have a gym or not, and they aren't gonna care how great your mats and all of your posters on the wall are. Right? Value rocks the world, and your commitment to serving people also rocks the world. Okay? So if you are committed to getting that which is in your heart and in your mind, that you that keeps you up at night, that makes you, not be able to sleep because you're saying this is really important. I need to say this. I need to get this out. I encourage you to book a call with me. Again, I'm going to flash my Calendly. This is a site that you use to book calls with me. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this broadcast, and I'll see you guys this weekend. Take care. Bye.